After 15 years of military service as a specialized reconnaissance scout, I thought I had left danger behind. 3 combat tour had given me enough adrenaline for one lifetime. I wanted quiet. I wanted normal. I purchased the small ranch house in Oakwood Estates because of the mature trees, the good school district, and the reasonable property taxes. The American dream, wrapped in vinyl siding with a 2-car garage. My son Tyler was 9 when we moved in. His mother had left when he was 4, citing my military deployments as too much for her to handle. It had been just the 2 of us ever since. Tyler inherited my observant nature and quiet demeanor. He could identify bird species by their calls and track small animals through the woods behind our house. I taught him these things not to create a little soldier, but because they connected us. Those quiet moments tracking deer prints or identifying constellations on clear nights became our language. The neighbors seemed pleasant enough at first. The Johnson family across the street invited us to a barbecue our first weekend. The elderly couple next door brought over a homemade apple pie. I noticed the neighborhood watch signs but thought nothing of them. Many communities had them. They suggested safety, vigilance, concepts I understood well. The first notice appeared on my door 3 weeks after moving in, a white envelope with an official-looking letterhead, Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association. The letter inside informed me that my grass exceeded the acceptable height by 1 inch and requested immediate remediation. I mowed the lawn that same day. I had no interest in conflict. A second notice arrived the following week about a bicycle, Tyler's bicycle, left in the front yard overnight. I reminded Tyler to put it away properly and again thought little of it. The third notice cited improper trash can placement. The fourth mentioned unapproved garden stakes supporting my tomato plants. I had signed no HOA agreement when purchasing the house. My realtor had confirmed there was no active association. Still, I complied with their requests, assuming it was easier than creating friction in my new community. I wanted Tyler to have friends. I wanted acceptance, normal life. One evening, as I sorted through mail at the kitchen table, Tyler approached with a question. "Dad, who are those people who keep taking pictures of our house?" My head snapped up. What people, buddy? The clipboard people. They stand across the street and take pictures. Sometimes they walk around our yard when we are not home. I saw them from the school bus yesterday. I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, the vigilance I had worked so hard to suppress since leaving the service. I placed my hand on Tyler's shoulder and kept my voice casual. Probably just the neighborhood watch making sure everything is okay. But that night I pulled out my laptop and began researching Oakwood Estates. Official county records confirmed what I already knew. No registered homeowners association existed for our subdivision. The neighborhood watch, it seemed, had evolved into something unofficial but behaving with assumed authority, an authority I had been unwittingly legitimizing with my compliance. The next morning, I watched from behind my curtains as a middle-aged woman in a blue polo shirt with Oakwood Estates HOA embroidered on the chest took photographs of my mailbox. Something about her methodical documentation felt too familiar, too much like surveillance, too much like targeting. The harassment escalated gradually. New notices appeared with increasing frequency. My trash cans were 1 foot too close to the curb. The American flag displayed on my porch required committee approval. My garden beds needed to conform to approved landscaping standards. Each notice carried the threat of fines, though no mention of how these fines would be collected or under what authority they were imposed. I began to notice the pattern. 3 primary enforcers, led by a woman named Catherine Winters, who I learned was a real estate agent with properties throughout the neighborhood. From my window, I observed them making daily rounds, clipboards in hand, documenting supposed violations. They photographed homes, measured grass with rulers, and left notices with the precision of military operations. My training had taught me to gather intelligence before acting. I installed a discreet camera above my front door and began documenting their activities. I also started asking questions around the neighborhood. Many residents believed the HOA was legitimate. Some paid the fines out of fear or simply to avoid conflict. A few knew the truth but felt powerless against the socially connected enforcers. The monthly community meeting presented my first opportunity for direct confrontation. I arrived early and sat in the back of the elementary school cafeteria. About 30 residents attended. Catherine Sint oohed at the front in her polo shirt, reading from a list of community concerns. And finally, we have had complaints about unapproved modifications to properties, particularly on Elmwood Drive. Remember, any external changes require committee approval per Section 7 of our covenant. I raised my hand. Catherine nodded in my direction with a tight smile. I have been receiving notices about violations of HOA rules, I said calmly. I have researched county records and found no registered homeowners association for Oakwood Estates. Could you clarify under what legal authority these rules are being enforced? The room fell silent. Catherine's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. Mr. Mitchell, is it? We have operated under neighborhood covenant guidelines for 15 years. Perhaps your realtor failed to provide you with the proper documentation. I would be happy to provide you with a copy of our rules. That would be helpful, I responded, along with the legal documentation establishing the HOA's authority and its right to impose fines. Several attendees shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A man near the front turned to look at me with an expression that mixed surprise and what appeared to be respect. We can discuss this privately after the meeting, Catherine replied dismissively. Now, moving on to our spring beautification project. I stayed after the meeting, but Catherine avoided me, surrounded by her committee members. One of them, a balding man with glasses, approached me instead. You are making a mistake, he said quietly. Catherine has connections throughout this town. The last family that challenged her ended up moving within 6 months. Nobody would speak to them. Their children were excluded from activities. It was unfortunate but necessary for community harmony. The threat was clear yet deniable. I simply nodded and left. Within days, the social isolation began. Parents would call their children inside when Tyler approached to play. Invitations to neighborhood functions stopped arriving. At school pickup, other parents would avoid eye contact. Tyler noticed, of course. Children always do. Why does nobody talk to us anymore, Dad? He asked one afternoon as we watched neighborhood children playing across the street. They had been his friends just weeks before. Sometimes people follow others instead of thinking for themselves, I explained, choosing my words carefully. It does not make them bad people, just afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid of being different, afraid of standing up for what is right. He considered this with the seriousness only a 9-year-old can muster. Like how you taught me about pack mentality with wolves. I smiled, something like that, buddy, but we will be okay, you and me against the world, remember. He nodded solemnly, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. That night I found myself retrieving a locked case from the attic. Inside was not weapons as one might expect from a former military man, but tools of another kind, surveillance equipment, tracking devices, items I had purchased legally but had hoped never to need in civilian life. I was not planning anything yet, just assessing resources, preparing contingencies, old habits. The battle lines had been drawn not by me but by them. They had made it clear, conform or be cast out, but they did not realize who they were dealing with. I had faced far worse than suburban social warfare, and I had never been one to surrender territory without a fight. The first fine arrived in an official-looking envelope, $300 for continued violations of community standards. The second followed a week later, $500 for refusal to comply with landscaping requirements. Each carried the implied threat of legal action if left unpaid. I took the notices to James Harper, an attorney recommended by a former military colleague. His office was small but professional, located above a coffee shop downtown. Harper reviewed the documents with a frown that deepened with each page. This is completely unenforceable, he concluded, setting the papers aside. Without registered HOA documentation filed with the county, without signed agreements from homeowners, these are essentially just strongly worded requests. They cannot legally fine you. They cannot place liens on your property. They have no actual authority. So I can ignore them. Legally, yes, Harper leaned forward. But from what you have described, these people use social pressure, not legal means. They control the neighborhood through fear and connections. The law may be on your side, but that does not mean this will be easy. I nodded. I understand that. Document everything, Harper advised. If they trespass on your property, if they harass you or your son, that gives us legal recourse. Until then, this is unfortunately a social problem, not a legal one. That evening, I installed additional security cameras covering all approaches to my house. I positioned them discreetly under eaves and behind shrubs, not because I was doing anything wrong, but because I did not want to telegraph my preparations. The system sent alerts to my phone for any motion detected near the property boundaries. Within days, the cameras captured Catherine and her associates entering my backyard while Tyler and I were grocery shopping. They examined my shed, took photographs of my grill placement, and measured the height of my fence. Clear trespassing, documented from multiple angles. The situation with Tyler became impossible to ignore when he came home from school with a torn backpack and dirt-streaked jeans. "What happened?" I asked, kneeling to examine a scrape on his elbow. Tyler looked at the floor. "Nothing." "Buddy," I said gently, "remember our deal, no secrets between us, especially not about important things." He sighed. "Jason and Michael said I cannot play with them anymore because their parents said we do not follow the rules. Then Jason said you are going to get arrested. I told him that was stupid. Then he pushed me." I controlled my expression carefully, though inside I felt a cold fury building. "Did you push back?" "No, you said violence is only for protection, not for anger." I hugged him tight. "You did the right thing. I am proud of you." That night after Tyler was asleep, I reviewed the security footage from the previous week. The same children who had bullied my son were visible playing in their front yard when Catherine stopped to speak with their parents. The timing was not coincidental. The next day, I encountered Catherine at the local grocery store. I had not planned the meeting, but when I saw her examining produce in the vegetable section, I decided a direct approach was necessary. "Catherine," I said pleasantly, "I would like to discuss the recent trespassing on my property." She startled slightly, but recovered quickly. "I have no idea what you are talking about, Mr. Mitchell. I have video footage of you and two others entering my backyard yesterday at 2:15 p.m. That is trespassing. There is no homeowners association that grants you inspection rights." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me?" "Not at all, just stating facts. As I will state another fact. My son came home from school injured yesterday, bullied by children whose parents you spoke with last week." "Children have disagreements all the time," she replied dismissively. "Perhaps if your son learned to follow rules better, he would fit in more easily. Children learn from their parents, after all." I maintained a calm demeanor, though my pulse had quickened. "My son follows the actual rules that matter, the legitimate ones." Catherine leaned closer, her voice lowering. "You know, Mr. Mitchell, as a concerned community member, I cannot help but notice your son walks home alone quite often. Elmwood Drive can be busy after school. It would be terrible if something happened because proper supervision was not in place." The threat hung in the air between us. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The suburban father retreated and something else emerged, something forged in combat zones and honed through years of training. My vision focused with crystalline clarity. I noted her elevated pulse visible at her neck, her dilated pupils, the slight tremor in her right hand, fear responses. She was afraid of me, as she should be. "Be very careful about the next steps you take, Catherine," I said softly. "I am not someone who responds well to threats, especially regarding my son." I turned and walked away, leaving my shopping cart where it stood. As I drove home, I recognized what had happened. The hunter, the tracker, the protector had awakened. A part of myself I had tried to leave behind was now fully alert, fully engaged, and it was already assessing the terrain, identifying threats, and planning countermeasures. "Remember the safe zones we talked about?" I asked Tyler as we walked through our morning routine. He nodded, pouring cereal into his bowl. Mrs. Abernathy's house on the corner, the convenience store on Main Street, and the library. And if anyone at all, tries to get you to go with them, run to a safe zone and call you immediately, he recited, even if they say they know you or that you sent them. That is right, I adjusted his collar. And what is our code word? Thunderbird, he said with a small smile. It was his favorite car model from my collection of miniatures. These conversations had become our new normal. What had started as general safety advice had evolved into specific protocols. I had begun teaching Tyler modified versions of situational awareness techniques from my military training, how to identify if someone is following you, how to note escape routes in any environment, how to recognize when adult behavior transitions from normal to concerning. We are not afraid. I reminded him our daily mantra, we are prepared. He repeated it with the solemnity of a much older child. Sometimes I worried I was robbing him of innocence, but then I would remember Catherine's veiled threat in the grocery store and my resolve would strengthen. The world contained threats. Pretending otherwise did not protect children, it endangered them. I installed a GPS tracker in Tyler's backpack and gave him a basic phone programmed with emergency contacts. Each day when he walked the 3 blocks home from the bus stop, I monitored his progress remotely while continuing my work as a freelance security consultant from my home office. Each day he arrived safely. Each day I breathed a little easier. Until Tuesday. The afternoon was crisp, leaves crunching underfoot as children dispersed from the bus stop at the corner of Maple and Elmwood. Tyler set off along his usual route, his red backpack bouncing slightly with each step. I watched his progress on my phone, the small blue dot moving steadily along the mapped route. Then the dot stopped. Through my home security app, I switched to the small camera Tyler carried, disguised as a backpack keychain. The image showed the sidewalk, part of the street, and the lower portion of a silver sedan that had pulled alongside him. A window lowered, a woman's voice, friendly but with underlying tension. Tyler, honey, your dad asked us to pick you up today. He had an emergency call and could not reach you. The camera angle shifted as Tyler took a small step back, not running yet but creating distance, just as we had practiced. Who are you? His voice was steady, making me proud even as adrenaline flooded my system. It is Mrs. Peterson and Mr. Wilson from the neighborhood committee. Your father called us because he had to help with an emergency down at the community center. He tried to call but could not reach you. Through the camera I could now see the woman's face, Patricia Peterson, Catherine's chief lieutenant in the fake HOA. Beside her sat Richard Wilson, the balding man who had delivered the veiled threat after the community meeting. I need the code word, Tyler said firmly. A pause, Patricia's smile tightened. Sweetie, there is no time for games. Your dad is waiting. Get in the car. The camera image jolted as Tyler took another step back. If my dad sent you, you would know the code word. Richard's face appeared now, leaning across Patricia. Listen, your father needs you to come with us right now. Do not be difficult. The car door opened. Richard began to step out. Tyler turned and ran. The camera image bounced wildly as he sprinted away from the road, cutting through the Harrisons' front yard, following exactly the escape route we had practiced. I was already moving, grabbing my keys, my heart hammering against my ribs. On the phone screen, I saw the silver sedan make a U-turn and slowly cruise in the direction Tyler had fled. But they remained on the road, unable to follow his path between houses. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Mr. Mitchell, this is Edna Abernathy. Your son just arrived at my house quite upset. He says someone tried to take him. I am on my way, Mrs. Abernathy. Do not open the door for anyone else. I arrived at the elderly woman's corner house in under 3 minutes. Tyler ran into my arms the moment I stepped inside. You did perfectly, I told him, my voice thick with emotion. Exactly right, I am so proud of you. Mrs. Abernathy, a retired schoolteacher who had been the first friendly face when we moved to the neighborhood, looked bewildered. He said people from the homeowners association tried to make him get into their car, said you had sent them. I did not send anyone, I confirmed, holding Tyler tightly. They lied. Her face hardened with unexpected resolve. That Catherine Winters and her cronies have gone too far this time. First, they try to find me for my rose trellises, and now this. This is absolutely unacceptable. I thanked her for being there for Tyler, for being our safe house. As we walked home, taking a circuitous route and checking frequently for the silver sedan, I felt something shifting inside me, a decision crystallizing with each step. They had crossed the final line. They had attempted to take my child under false pretenses. In military terms, they had committed an act of aggression that demanded a proportional response. In father terms, they had threatened what mattered most to me in the world. The rules of engagement had just changed. The police station smelled of coffee and floor cleaner. Officer Daniels took notes mechanically as I described the incident, his expression carefully neutral. I provided the video from Tyler's backpack camera, the license plate of the sedan, and the names of the individuals involved. So these people claimed you had sent them to pick up your son, Daniels summarized, but you had done no such thing. Correct, they attempted to lure my 9-year-old child into their vehicle, using deliberate falsehoods about an emergency. Daniels nodded, but something in his manner had shifted when I mentioned the names. And you believe this is connected to some dispute about a homeowners association. It is not a dispute. They are operating a fraudulent HOA. They have been harassing residents, issuing fake fines, and trespassing on private property. I have documentation of all of this. Mrs. Winters is very active in community affairs, Daniel said carefully. She organizes the annual charity drive for the department. Mr. Wilson serves on the town council. The implication was clear. These were respected community figures. I was the newcomer, the outsider making accusations. Someone tried to take my son, I said, my voice steady but hard. That goes beyond community disputes. We will look into it, Mr. Mitchell. They may simply have been trying to help, a miscommunication perhaps. In the meantime, perhaps you should try to smooth things over with the neighborhood committee. Might make your life easier. I stared at him for a long moment, memorizing his face, his badge number. Are you suggesting I should simply ignore an attempt to lure my child into a stranger's car? Daniel sighed. I am suggesting that small towns work differently than whatever city you came from. People need to get along. Mrs. Winters has lived here for 30 years. I watched him slide the report into a desk drawer rather than the active case file on his desk. Message received. That night, after ensuring Tyler was asleep, I descended to the basement. The locked cabinet in the corner contained equipment I had purchased legally but had hoped never to need. Surveillance gear, night vision monoculars, directional microphones, tools of my former trade. My hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking batteries, testing connections. The movements were automatic, familiar. I had spent years in reconnaissance, tracking high-value targets across hostile territory. I had hidden in plain sight, gathered intelligence, and delivered actionable information to command centers. Those skills had kept me alive in places where discovery meant death. I had never expected to deploy those skills in suburban America. But Catherine Winters and her accomplices had miscalculated badly when they targeted my son. They thought they were dealing with just another homeowner they could intimidate. They did not realize they were facing a hunter who had tracked more dangerous prey through far more challenging terrain. The next evening, dressed in dark clothing and moving with practiced silence, I began my surveillance operation. Each night I focused on different targets. Catherine's house on Monday, Richard's on Tuesday, Patricia's on Wednesday. I documented their comings and goings. I photographed visitors. I used directional microphones to capture conversations on porches and in backyards. Patterns emerged quickly. Weekly meetings held in Catherine's sunroom. Regular visitors who arrived carrying folders of papers, money changing hands. The infrastructure of their operation became clear. What began as a legitimate neighborhood watch had evolved under Catherine's guidance into a pseudo-governmental entity that extracted money through intimidation. but it went deeper than simple neighborhood bullying. As I expanded my surveillance, recording their meetings and photographing documents left visible through windows, a larger picture emerged. Catherine was using the fake HOA as leverage in her real estate business. Properties that received multiple violations would see their owners eventually sell, often to Catherine herself or to business associates at below-market rates. The properties would then be cosmetically updated and flipped for substantial profits. Even more disturbing were the blackmail operations. Richard Wilson used his position on the town council to access personal information about residents, financial difficulties, medical issues, family problems. This information was weaponized to ensure compliance with their demands. The elderly widow who suddenly withdrew her complaints, the single father who abruptly moved away, the pieces fit together now. On the seventh night of surveillance, I hit the jackpot. Catherine's book club, a gathering of her closest allies in the fake HOA scheme, met in her living room. Through the directional microphone, I captured their unguarded conversation. "The Mitchell situation is becoming problematic," Catherine said. "He is not responding to social pressure like the others." "The attempt to pick up his kid backfired," Patricia admitted. "The boy ran. Now that old bat Abernathy is asking questions too." "Mitchell filed a police report," Richard added. "Daniels buried it, of course, but we need to be careful." "What do we know about him?" Catherine asked. "There must be leverage somewhere." "Military background," another woman said. "D. Divorced, no local family connections. Works from home as some kind of security consultant." "Financial pressures," Catherine pressed. "None that I can find, no debt, paid cash for the house." Catherine's frustration was visible even from my concealed position. Everyone has pressure points, find his. I had heard enough. I had expected petty tyranny, but this was organized fraud, blackmail, and now conspiracy. They had attempted to take my child as an intimidation tactic. They had buried a police report through corrupt connections. They had declared war without realizing who their opponent was. Now they would learn. Back in my basement, I organized the evidence. Financial records showing the property schemes, audio recordings of blackmail discussions, video of trespassing, photographs of documents. I created separate files for each affected household in the neighborhood, documenting the specific injustices perpetrated against them. The elderly widow blackmailed over medical debts. The immigrant family threatened with exposure of their cousin's immigration status. The single mother pressured about custody issues. The hunter had his prey in sight now. The predators had become the hunted, and they had no idea what was coming. War is not won through single battles but through campaigns, coordinated actions directed toward strategic objectives. As I organized my evidence and formulated my plan, I drew upon military principles that had served me well in combat zones. Identify key terrain, isolate enemy forces, gather allies, coordinate timing for maximum effect. My kitchen table became a command center. Aerial photos of the neighborhood laid out with key locations marked, profiles of HOA members and their victims, timeline of escalation. My objective was not merely to protect my family, but to dismantle the entire corrupt organization. The first phase involved selective distribution of intelligence. I created individual packages containing evidence specific to each victim of the fake HOA schemes. Mrs. Abernathy received documentation of how they had targeted elderly residents with false medical claims. The Rodriguez family learned how their immigration concerns had been exploited. The Johnsons discovered how their property had been deliberately devalued through coordinated violations, before Catherine's business partner made a lowball offer. I delivered these packages at night, slipping them under doors with a simple note: "You are not alone. Meeting at 1614 Elmwood Drive, Saturday, 7 p.m. Come if you want justice." By Thursday, whispered conversations were occurring throughout the neighborhood. People who had been isolated by Catherine's social warfare began making connections. Eyes that had avoided contact now met with shared understanding. The atmosphere shifted palpably. Catherine noticed. Her daily rounds became tense, her smile strained. Through my surveillance, I documented increased meetings of her inner circle, urgent phone calls, attempts to reassert control. They knew something was happening but could not identify the source or extent of the threat. Saturday evening arrived. Tyler was staying with a trusted former military colleague outside the neighborhood. My living room had been arranged with chairs in a semicircle. A projector was connected to my laptop, screen ready. At 6:50 p.m., the first hesitant knock came at my door. Mrs. Abernathy, clutching the file I had provided her. By 7:10, 23 residents had arrived, nearly a third of the neighborhood, each bearing their own documentation of Catherine's schemes. "Thank you for coming," I began once everyone was seated. "Many of you do not know me well. My name is Daniel Mitchell. My son Tyler and I moved here 9 months ago seeking peace and community. What we found instead was corruption and intimidation." I explained my background briefly, emphasizing not the combat aspects but the intelligence gathering. I have spent my professional life identifying threats and documenting activities. When Catherine Winters and her associates attempted to lure my 9-year-old son into their car under false pretenses, they triggered an investigation they were not prepared for. For the next 30 minutes, I presented evidence methodically. Financial records showing how the fake HOA extracted money that went directly to private accounts. Documentation of property value manipulation. Audio recordings of blackmail discussions. Video of trespassing and harassment. Each of you has received evidence of how they specifically targeted you or your family, I concluded. But this is not just about individual grievances. This is about taking back our community from people who have used fear as a weapon. The room hummed with tension, anger, and something else, hope. Mrs. Rodriguez stood first. "They threatened to report my cousin to immigration if I did not remove my Garden Virgin Mary statue," she said, her voice trembling. "I have been afraid for years." Others followed, the single father who paid fines he could not afford. The young couple bullied about their choice of door color. The veteran with PTSD threatened over his service dog. Years of grievances poured out, creating a tapestry of systematic abuse. "What do we do now?" someone finally asked. "We act together," I replied. "Catherine's power comes from isolation. She targets individuals, separates them from support. United, we present a force she cannot intimidate." We developed a plan for the upcoming community meeting scheduled for Wednesday night. Roles were assigned, evidence would be brought, testimonies prepared. For the first time, Catherine would face not a single dissenter but an organized resistance. Word of our gathering must have reached Catherine. The next morning, she arrived at my door with Richard and 2 other committee members. I was waiting, security camera recording. "Daniel," she said, using my first name with forced familiarity. "We need to discuss these meetings you have been hosting. Unauthorized gatherings violate community guidelines." I smiled calmly. "There are no legitimate community guidelines, Catherine, as you well know." Her expression hardened. "You are making a serious mistake. This neighborhood worked perfectly before you arrived with your military mentality. We maintain standards here. Standards like attempting to kidnap children, or blackmailing elderly residents, or manipulating property values for personal profit." The color drained from her face. Richard stepped forward. "Those are serious accusations without evidence." "I have extensive evidence," I replied, "documented meticulously. Would you like to see the recordings of your Tuesday meetings, or perhaps the financial transfers to offshore accounts, or maybe the conversation where you specifically discussed using my son as leverage?" They retreated quickly after that, huddled in urgent conversation at the end of my driveway. The counterattack had begun, and they were already off balance, reacting rather than controlling. The Wednesday community meeting became the battlefield we had prepared for. Catherine arrived early with her committee, arranging chairs, setting up her usual presentation. The room filled quickly, not with the usual 20 or 30 residents but with nearly 80 people. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation. Catherine began her agenda as if nothing had changed. "Thank you all for coming. First item, the spring beautification project and associated fees." "Point of order," I interrupted, standing. "Before we discuss any projects or fees, We need to establish the legal standing of this organization to collect money or enforce rules." Catherine's practiced smile remained fixed. "Mr. Mitchell, we have addressed your concerns previously. This community has operated under established guidelines for 15 years. Without legal registration as a homeowners association," I countered, "without legally binding agreements, without transparent financial accounting." Mrs. Abernathy stood next. "I would like to see the financial reports for all fees collected over the past 5 years." Others joined in rapid succession. Each question precisely targeted weak points we had identified in our planning session. Catherine attempted to regain control, her voice rising. "These disruptions are unproductive. If you have concerns, they can be submitted in writing to the committee." It was time for the conclusive evidence. I connected my laptop to the projector that had been set up earlier by an ally on the school maintenance staff. The screen illuminated with financial records, property transactions, and finally, the damning audio recordings of Catherine discussing blackmail strategies. Her own voice filled the room. "Everyone has leverage points. Find something we can use against the Thompsons. Medical records, financial problems, anything." The room erupted. Catherine's inner circle began distancing themselves physically, moving away from her as if contamination might spread through proximity. Community members who had enforced her rules now denied knowledge of her methods. The power structure visibly crumbled before our eyes. Catherine made one last desperate attempt. "These recordings are obviously fabricated. This is defamation. I have built this community for 15 years. "You have exploited this community," corrected Mrs. Rodriguez, standing tall despite her small stature. "You have used our fears against us." "And it ends tonight," I added quietly. The vote that followed was merely formality. The fake HOA was unanimously dissolved. A legitimate community association would be formed with proper legal registration, transparent finances, and democratically elected leadership. Catherine and her inner circle departed before the meeting concluded, their influence shattered beyond repair. As residents mingled afterward, sharing stories and making new connections, I felt a sense of accomplishment far different from military victories. This was not about destruction but restoration, not about defeating enemies but rebuilding community. The hunter had completed his mission, the territory was secured, the predators had been driven out. Now came the harder work of healing what they had damaged. The legal consequences unfolded with the methodical precision of justice properly served. Armed with our evidence, a group of 10 residents, including myself, filed formal complaints with the county prosecutor's office. The investigation proceeded despite initial resistance from local authorities with connections to Catherine. 3 weeks after the community meeting, police officers arrived at Catherine's house with search warrants. Similar scenes played out at the homes of Richard, Patricia, and 2 other committee members. News cameras captured the moment boxes of evidence were carried out. Documentation of years of financial fraud, records of blackmail and intimidation, evidence of the attempted luring of my son, reclassified now as attempted kidnapping. The charges were extensive: fraud, conspiracy, extortion, criminal impersonation of a legal entity, attempted kidnapping. The prosecutor, facing public pressure and media attention, pursued the case aggressively. Catherine and her associates rejected initial plea offers, believing their community standing would protect them. It did not. The neighborhood underwent its own healing process. A properly registered community association was formed with elected officials, transparent finances, and minimal regulations focused on actual community needs rather than control. Monthly potluck dinners were established to strengthen connections between neighbors who had been isolated from each other by Catherine's tactics. For Tyler and me, reintegration happened gradually. The children who had been forbidden to play with him returned first, hesitantly at first, and then with the natural enthusiasm of youth who carry no grudges. Parents approached with awkward apologies that I accepted graciously. "We should have stood up sooner," became a common refrain that I met with understanding rather than judgment. Fear is a powerful motivator, one I understood well from both military and civilian life. Mrs. Abernathy organized a neighborhood barbecue in her backyard. the first truly inclusive community event in years. Tyler moved through the crowd with growing confidence, no longer the isolated child standing alone on the sidewalk. I watched him teaching other children how to identify bird calls, sharing the knowledge we had cultivated during our isolated months. The Rodriguez family brought homemade tamales. The Johnson family contributed their famous potato salad. The elderly Mr. Finch played guitar while children danced on the lawn. Community formed not through enforcement but through genuine connection. This was the neighborhood I had hoped for when purchasing our home, not perfect but authentic. The criminal cases concluded with plea agreements for most of Catherine's associates and a full trial for Catherine herself. She maintained her innocence throughout, portraying herself as a community builder victimized by resentful newcomers. The evidence proved otherwise. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. At her sentencing hearing, the judge spoke words that resonated throughout the community. The desire for order and beauty in our surroundings does not justify tyranny over our neighbors. True community is built on respect and consent, not fear and coercion. Catherine received 8 years in state prison. Her associates received lesser sentences according to their involvement. The real estate properties acquired through their schemes were sold, with proceeds established as a community trust fund for neighborhood improvements and assistance to families who had suffered financial losses. As summer turned to fall, our home truly became ours. No more notices on the door, no more surveillance from across the street, no more social isolation. Tyler joined the community soccer team. I volunteered to teach basic outdoor skills to local scout troops. We planted trees along the community park boundary that would mature long after Catherine's sentence was complete, a living reminder that growth takes time but brings beauty and strength. One evening, as Tyler and I walked home from the park, the setting sun casting long shadows across familiar lawns, he asked a question that gave me pause. "Dad, are you still the hunter now, or are you back to being just regular dad?" I considered this carefully. The military precision, the tactical thinking, the heightened awareness, these would always be part of me. But they existed now in balance with the father who helped with homework and cheered at soccer games. Both, I answered honestly. The hunter is part of who I am. It helped protect us when we needed protection, but I do not need to track enemies anymore. Now I can use those same skills to notice good things, like that cardinal in the maple tree, or how Mrs. Abernathy always waters her flowers at 7 o'clock, or how your coach positions players differently depending on who they are playing against. Tyler nodded thoughtfully. Observation skills for peace instead of war. Exactly right, buddy. We continued our walk in comfortable silence. The security cameras remained on our house, but they represented prudence now rather than fear. The tracking apps on our phones connected us rather than monitored us. The situational awareness I had taught Tyler had become simply good life skills rather than defensive measures. The fake HOA had tried to control our community through fear. They had targeted my family, threatened my child, and undermined the peace I had sought after years of military service. They had not expected a father with my particular background and skills. They had not anticipated the hunter who would track their movements, document their crimes, and ultimately bring them to justice. But the greatest victory was not in their downfall. It was in the authentic community that rose in their absence. It was in the sound of children playing freely in front yards. It was in the genuine smiles and waves from neighbors. It was in the knowledge that Tyler would grow up in a place where people stood together rather than turned away in fear. The trained military hunter had done his job, protecting what mattered most. Now the father could enjoy the peace that followed, a peace earned not through submission to tyranny, but through the courage to confront it. A community worth defending had become, at last, a community worth living in.